Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into today's second video. We've already done Can Sip Soda, which you can find on the homepage. Just scroll down a bit and it'll be there. It's looking at the next 6 months, so going from May through to October. Remember, it's just for fun. It's not to be relied upon at all, particularly as you're going several months out. But the charts are there, so you might as well have a look at them. And quite an interesting update it is as well, with a signal for a pretty mixed summer coming through. So check that out when you're done with this video. Of course, this video is going to concentrate on the next week to 10 days. We've got signs of high pressure building over Greenland. A proper Greenland high could be getting itself going around a week's time, next weekend and into the second week of April. I know a lot of you have been despairing about the lack of blocking over the past 2 or 3 years since that really blocked scenario that we had in late winter, early spring 2013. We haven't really seen any northern blocking to speak of for the past couple of years. I know a lot of you have been sort of tearing your hair out wondering where the northern blocking has gone, if it's still even possible to get northern blocking. Well, if this comes off, what we're seeing with the models for the weekend and next week, it will prove, if nothing else, that we can certainly still get proper heights rising over Greenland. The trick always is to get that coinciding with the winter months, because now we're into April, halfway through the spring, and the cold is just losing its intensity really to the north. So even though we get this proper Greenland high setting up, we may not get particularly cold from it. We might just keep low pressure round the country, producing quite a lot of rain and sort of chilly temperatures, but we may not get anything really cold penetrating down from the Arctic. And the reason, despite the heights over Greenland, is that we're so late into the year that the cold is losing its intensity, and it can't battle its way southwards into the mid-latitudes as easily as it does in the winter if this setup develops. So I'll show you the charts in a second. Before I get on with that though, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages. Have a browse widgets, click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Thanks so much for doing that. This video adds most of the pages, which open out within the content, and when you watch them, they'll close back up again, and it helps to pay for the website. Really nice afternoon for England and Wales this afternoon. It's not as good for Scotland and Northern Ireland, so just dealing with you folks up in the north. First of all, temperatures are quite chilly there. It's cloudy and it's damp. So it's not great in the north. I think it will improve a little bit this afternoon, probably feeling a bit warmer. But overall, it's still quite disappointing for the north. But for England and Wales, a very pleasant afternoon. There's a lot of sunny spells coming through, and temperatures widening into the mid-teens Celsius, 15, 16 degrees. Some place in the southeast could go up as high as 17 or 18 degrees through the course of this afternoon. So really quite a warm afternoon. Do get out and make the most of it, because after this I think you're going to have a lot of showery conditions coming up over the coming week. Now we're even going to have some showers setting off this evening, and they could be a bit thundery actually. So this is the stochastic pressure chart for today, with low pressure out to the west, and we're bringing up this quite unstable southerly flow. So we've got showers breaking out through the south coast during this afternoon, and they'll get more widespread and push northwards across England and Wales into this evening, and really becoming quite heavy and intense by the time you go through to the second half of the night. And that's particularly through northern England, parts of Wales and Midlands, possibly into central, southern, southeastern England as well. Now, the convective potential of the Cape, and I haven't used these charts, I don't think, so far this season, but you'll be seeing a lot more of these, particularly with storm watch over the coming few months. But the convective potential isn't great, but there's probably enough there, just about, particularly to the southwest and the southeast. There's probably just enough there to be producing maybe a flash of lightning or a rumble of thunder through the night. Now, this is not violent thunderstorms with fork lightning and copious amounts of thunder through the course of the night. Nothing like that. It's nowhere near warm enough, humid enough for that. But probably just enough for you to be woken up perhaps by a clap of thunder at some point through the night, maybe a flash of lightning somewhere. And it's very early for this. 4th of April is really early to be thinking about getting rumbles of thunder, but it could just about come off tonight. And these showery conditions will then last through much of the coming week, and then all eyes is what's going on over Greenland and the North Pole. So have a look at the Arctic Oscillation. We don't use these charts all that often. This is telling us where the Arctic Oscillation has been and then where it's forecast to go. The black line here is the observed part of the Arctic Oscillation. That's where the Arctic Oscillation has been, going right way back into winter. We can go back to the start of December with this. The red line's here at the end, where the ensemble of the GFS model is predicting the Arctic Oscillation to to go. Now, what you always have to bear in mind with this is that the Arctic Oscillation is just an index that is reflecting the state of the atmosphere over the North Pole. It isn't a driver of anything. A lot of people talk about the Arctic Oscillation and its cousin, the North Atlantic Oscillation. They talk about these oscillations as though they are drivers of the weather pattern. They're not drivers, they just reflect and tell you what the weather is doing. So when the Arctic Oscillation is positive, as it has been throughout most of the winter, except for this bit of early January, first half of January did go really quite negative with the Arctic Oscillation, coincide with a bit of a cold snap in the UK, but generally it was a positive Arctic Oscillation winter. When the Arctic Oscillation is positive, it tells you that you've got a strong polar vortex over the North Pole, which bottles up the cold air over the pole and enhances the westerlies through the mid-latitude. So essentially, when the Arctic Oscillation is positive, it's telling you that you're having a mainly westerly Atlantic-driven winter. Conversely, when it goes negative, telling you that there's some blocking over the pole and cold air is coming out of the pole into the mid-latitudes. Now, it's not quite as straightforward as that, because where the blocking is sitting is always the critical factor. And you'll see that we did go very negative through the first half of January, actually, with the Arctic Oscillation. This point just here, from around New Year's Day through to sort of the 16th, 17th of January, we went very negative with the Arctic Oscillation. We didn't get all that much away of cold weather. We got a little bit of a cold snap, but nothing overly dramatic. And that's because the blocking that did form when the Arctic Oscillation went negative, it just wasn't in a position to be conducive to bring proper cold air down to us. So it's not as straightforward as saying the Arctic Oscillation is negative, so we'll get cold. You have to always bear in mind where exactly that blocking is sitting. Anyway, coming on to the current scenario, and we can see that the red lines here at the end of the graph are trending downwards. So that's telling us that the Arctic Oscillation, after being really quite positive through most of February and much of March, is going into negative territory as we go through April. And there's some really quite dramatic plunges going on here with some of these ensemble members. So it could turn really very negative indeed with the Arctic Oscillation. This tells us that blocking is going to be forming over the North Pole. And it looks like the position of that blocking is going to be on our side of the pole this time. It's going to be around Greenland. Have a look at the charts in a second. And that does bring us the risk, no more than that, of producing some colder conditions as we're going through April. The North Atlantic Oscillation, very similar, same idea. The black line here is the observed part of the graph, the red lines at the end, where the GFS ensembles are forecasting North Atlantic Oscillation to go. This is, again, reflecting the setup in the Atlantic Ocean. It's not driving anything, it's just an index reflecting the state of the atmosphere. So when the North Atlantic Oscillation is positive, again, it's telling you that you're in a westerly flow. You've got low pressure around Iceland, and high pressure will be around the Azores, strengthening the westerlies through mid-latitudes, and typically you'll have an Atlantic-driven pattern. When the North Atlantic Oscillation goes negative, tells you that you're probably switching that around. So you've got high pressure forming around Iceland, and low pressure going through the Azores, and that tends to be a scenario that produces cold weather, especially in winter. And in summer, when this occurs, you get blocking it to the north. It tends to be a pretty dismal pattern with low pressure stuck somewhere over Western Europe. And again, you see from the forecast part of this, so the red lines here at the end, we're starting off really quite positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation, but the trend definitely, as we're going into April, this is 1st of April just here, the trend definitely is downwards. So it looks like we've got the North Atlantic Oscillation going negative, looks like we've got the Arctic Oscillation going negative. All the indexes are telling us we're going to be getting this area of high pressure forming over Greenland, which is sending these indexes negative. And a blocking feature looks like it's setting up. So let's have a look at the GFS. And this is for Thursday. We've got low pressure clearing away to the east, high pressure building out in the Atlantic. It could be quite a cool day on Thursday with quite a cold northerly wind, possibly bringing some wintry showers to the north of the country. Then low pressure comes back in as we go through into Friday. That could bring quite a bit of wet weather. And then into Saturday and Sunday, this is really when the blocking gets going. So you see low pressure is right over top of the country. That could bring in a lot of wet weather. I think it's a Grand National at the weekend. That could be impacted by wet conditions. Lot of wet weather coming up at the weekend with these areas of low pressure. But the key thing, really, is this ridge building out of the Atlantic and going up towards Greenland. So by the time you go through to Sunday the 10th, look at that. We've got a proper Greenland high setting up here. Whenever you get yellow and orange colours appearing over Greenland on these maps, that tells you that you have a proper blocking feature in place with a trough of low pressure underneath it. The jet stream is going something like that in a very unusual type pattern. So this technically can be bring cold air down from the north, because the flow is sort of northeast between the low pressure to the south and the high pressure to the north. What you have to do is clear this low pressure away into Central Europe to really tap in to that cold air, and it never quite comes off actually on this GFS run. So this takes into the start of next week. This is Monday the 11th. Again, really classic blocking feature. Look at that, 1045 millibar area of high pressure stuck right over top of Greenland. But we are generally under low pressure, and it's generally centred just to the west, so it means that despite the blocking feature, it isn't especially cold, with the flow still generally coming from a southerly point. So just to show you that in this country, even when you get the blocking feature setting up, especially when you get this late into the year, of course, cold is always having a struggle to get to us. Day 10 looks like that, still with very classic blocking there over Greenland, but we're still generally mild. But I think the key point from this is probably going to be quite a lot of heavy rain, actually. These areas of low pressure will, I think, be producing really quite a lot of wet weather. And you see the upper air temperatures are generally quite mild. Despite that block, the upper air temperatures not really suggesting anything especially cold. ECWF is very similar. So Thursday we get that swipe of colder air from the northwest. Then the next area of low pressure moves in across the country through Friday in Saturday. The ridge building out to the north and west around the top of that low pressure. So by the time you go through to Sunday and then on into Monday, again, we've got a very classic blocking feature here setting up over Greenland. Trough of low pressure is further south with the ECMWF compared to the GFS, which means these cold northeasterly winds are threatening. It's not desperately cold, but they're certainly closer here to bring cold air down from the pole towards us. It still doesn't quite come off right, but it is much closer than the GFS, and that's how we look on day 10, with again lots of blocking to the north with those yellow and orange colours around Greenland. The trough of low pressure is underneath it. Both the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation are well and truly negative here. If we got this in January, if we had this in January, I think we would probably have ended up in a really cold pattern, because the cold air is generally stronger, of course, when you're in winter. There's more of it about over the pole. So I think we probably would have tapped into cold air if this happened in winter. But as it's April, I'm not sure we'll get particularly cold from this, but I would expect quite a lot of wet weather. Finally, the GEM, this does bring us a bit of cold weather, actually. So Thursday, we get this swipe from the northwest. Then Friday, bring area of low pressure through. That'll take heavy rain Friday in Saturday across the country. Then the block forms behind it from the north and west. There we go with the heights, and the jet stream is doing something like that again. So we start to pull down colder air on the top of that low pressure, and this model does actually tap us into that cold air. So by the time you go through to Tuesday the 12th of April, we are bringing down cold air into this area of low pressure. Now, the low pressure has gone just about far enough east to allow those cold north to northeast winds to start to dig in. Really classic blocking feature there around Greenland and Iceland. And there's the upper air temperatures as well, showing that cold air is penetrating much further south by the start of next week compared to the ECM and the GFS. And then we end up on day 10 with the Canadian model, again with low pressure around the country, within fairly cold air, especially to the north. There could be wintry conditions if that came off, with still a good deal of blocking to the north. So, I'm not sure we're going to get all that cold from this, but it looks like we're going to get a proper block setting up over Greenland. And the key message from this is probably going to be, with low pressure underneath, expect a fair amount of rain through the first half of April. This isn't all that far away from the pattern that we had in April 1998. That also came after a really strong El Nino event. we're coming out of a really strong El Nino event now, of course. Do you remember April 1998? It was quite a wintry month for the north, but it also had a very severe flooding event through many parts of the Midlands and eastern England. I think it's around the 9th of April. And I'm not predicting a really severe flooding event by any means, but just keep an eye on things is the message, I think, over the next couple of weeks. If this block does form and fights with cold air against the warmer air that's establishing from the south, there could be the potential for some really quite wet weather indeed. And as I say, it happened in 1998, but we had quite a bad flood from a scenario that was quite similar to this. So it needs keeping an eye on. But the overall message is blocking is looks like going to get going over Greenland, and where we get cold, that's uncertain, but expect quite a lot of rain through the first half of April. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.